You're listening to Superflexology, a Superflex-focused fantasy football podcast with your hosts John Bauer and Mitch Sorensen.
All right, welcome to episode 17 of Superflexology, a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Network. I am your host, John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club and follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Superflexology. So, Mitch, the injury bug, I think it's hit you a little bit here. So how have your teams been standing up so far, at least from a dynasty perspective, because we're in so many leagues at this point?
It's not holding up well at all. I mean, Damian Williams is hurt. Golden Tate gets suspended. Shepard broke his thumb or finger, whatever it was. It's all bad. It hasn't been a good week.
That's all right. Listen, I've seen your teams. Some of them not so deep, but some you're going to be able to bounce back. So I have faith. As the summer progresses, we're going to continue to be joined by a lineup of star-studded guests. And tonight, that's no different. We have another fantastic guest joining us tonight. She can be found on Twitter at Stepmom Lauren, as she's brushing off her shoulders here in the video chat. A writer for the Fantasy Footballers, very opinionated, somewhat brash, Lauren Carpenter. What's going on, Lauren? Thanks for joining us.
Brash. I have never gotten that one. I do like that. I'm going to put that in my profile. I am brash, period. The end.
There you go.
Deal with it. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for having me. Although in my latest article, I was not quite opinionated. Like I said before, I skirted that line of I don't know which guy to take. So I'm just going to be like, they're both really good. Yay. The end.
Well, tonight we're going to look for a more definitive answer. So
you can dig all you want, John. We'll see. We'll see.
Wait, would you say we might be able to digs?
Oh, didn't. I see what you digs there.
Yeah, Mitch knows that I'm full of puns, and I actually just dropped one in our one league chat earlier tonight, and I don't think Mitch was very happy with it. But, it's funny because you just released the article about Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, what to look for in 2019 with the pair, a couple changes going on with that team. And the major topic that we want to talk about tonight, a couple wide receiver tandems. So there's a lot of teams out there, and we could have gone into 7 or 8 different teams where they have two fairly prolific fantasy football scores from the wide receiver position. So, Lauren, start us off tonight. Again, you just released an article. Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs. Share your thoughts. How does it shake out in 2019?
It's hard. I don't know. I don't. So here's the deal. I call it a conundrum in this article because these two players are almost like clones of each other, but they just happen to play in different spots in the wide receiver position. So if you really wanted to get down into nitty gritty, and if you honestly forced me to pick a name, I would lean towards Diggs. You see how I didn't do it the whole way? I wasn't 100% Diggs, because these guys are both so good and they're incredibly talented and explosive that it's really hard to put all of your money on one guy or the other, because I think they're going to be fantasy productive. Adam Thielen is going pretty early. He is in the 3rd round, I believe, in half PPR. That might be too expensive for some people's taste because we need to kind of understand his environment this year. Last year, he had John DeFilippo, who didn't believe in running the ball, even with someone like a healthy Dalvin Cook, and he got fired for it. But they had the 4th highest attempts in the league, I believe, at 606 attempts in the pass game. That is not going to be repeated. They are going to have a higher run game with Zimmer, with Stefanski, also known as Gary Kubiak. And so there will be a more balanced run versus pass offenses that we're going to see moving forward that will lower down his targets, him meaning Adam Thielen. And then if you look at the way the last 3 weeks kind of shook out between the two of them, they really relied on Diggs in his position. Oddly enough, he kind of looked more like a slot receiver than Adam Thielen did in the last 3 weeks. So we'll see how they work those two players in. But I actually have in my article some stats about those last 3 weeks. And I think Stephon Diggs, he got 23 targets and Adam Thielen only got 12. So it was almost double the amount that Adam Thielen had that, Diggs was able to do. Diggs had 3 touchdowns. Adam Thielen had none. Diggs finished with 39.1 points in half PPR. And I think Adam Thielen finished with 24, I think. So really this did favor Diggs. So if we're going to clone what happened in the last 3 weeks and say that's going to be 2019, you're looking at Diggs as your guy. Plus, he's going around later than Adam Thielen, so you don't have to spend as high a draft capital on him, but Some people are phasing them both out completely, which if you don't like them, you don't like them. But I happen to like both of these guys. So if I can have a chance to take either one of them, I'm going to do it.
You talk about people phasing that offense out. Well, maybe not the offense entirely, because people think that they're going to run 100% of the time now, and Dalvin Cook is going to be the main beneficiary.
Which is, I'm sorry, I completely disagree with that. Who is saying this? Everyone is saying it, I know, but like,
right, yep.
Is it coming from Zimmer? Like, is Zimmer saying we no longer believe in throwing the football? You cannot have a good run game without passing the football. It's going to be balanced.
So if you look at it, and it's funny because I saw a tweet earlier today, and you look at those numbers from the last 3 weeks of the season, weeks 15 and 16, the Minnesota Vikings, they got out to an early lead. They played the Dolphins. They won like 40-something to 17, and then they beat the Lions in the following week. Sorry, Mitch, I know you're a big Lions fan, but they had
not hard to beat the Lions. Not hard to do.
It happens often.
You're going to upset
My husband's
Mitch,
a Lions fan, so I feel your pain, Mitch.
So we look at it, and yes, they ran the ball more, but the numbers are skewed because it was very game script dependent. You look at those games, and again, they were off to an early lead. What reason do they have to throw the ball? And, looking at those splits, Thielen was wide receiver 59. Now, this is, I know you look at the half PPR, and in your article, I know that you mentioned that's the fantasy footballer's preferred scoring. There's your plug there. But looking at full PPR, he was wide receiver 59 compared to Diggs at wide receiver 21. Now, a lot of it's based on the touchdown production. Thielen didn't score a touchdown in the last 3 weeks. But, Mitch, what weight are you putting into those last 3 weeks, and how do you see Stefanski taking the reins with Kubiak stepping in? How do you see this shaking out? Do you see it being more like the first 14 weeks, the last 3 weeks, or kind of a mix?
A little bit of a mix, but more towards the last 3 weeks, just because they're going to be running some more 2 tight end sets. And I think that's a big reason why they grabbed Irv Smith as soon as they did in the draft. Basing off that 12 personnel, it means Thielen's not going to be in the slot as much as he was, because he was in the slot like 57% of the time. So I agree with Lauren, though. If I had to choose, I'm probably going to go with the Diggs, just because he's a little bit cheaper. But I love both players. But I do think they are going to run more than what they did previously. But at the same time, it's if Diggs doesn't hold up, I don't think Madison is all of a sudden going to be, the bell cow back in that backfield.
And, you mean Dalvin Cook? Yeah.
Yeah, if Dalvin doesn't hold up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Diggs, Dalvin, whatever.
You said Diggs.
Who cares? I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant, Mitch. I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant.
Every episode.
And you bring up a really good point to that too, because there is this focus now that suddenly Minnesota is going to forget how to throw the ball. Kirk Cousins is your quarterback. He's not like what they would consider the elite, but he's not a slouch. I bring that up in my article. He's a talented quarterback. They're going to throw the ball. You need to have a balanced offense, but Dalvin Cook does not have the durability to sustain as a bell cow running back that all you do is run. And like you said, Madison is the one who's right. Mattinson, sorry. However you say his name. I don't care. Whatever. That dude, he's the one right behind Dalvin Cook. So, I mean, are they really going to be able to run the ball as much as they think they're going to? Or is this going to have to, by default, going to be more balanced, which is how you win football games? I'm sorry. Like, I am the crazy, outgoing, nutty one in my marriage, and my husband is very subdued and normal, and he keeps me, like, chill and relaxed. Together, we make a dream team. This is also how football works.
I think that's good advice. Based on the article alone, I really like what you put together. Maybe in your intro, I should have said modest as well.
I'm super humble. I am super humble. Besides being the greatest person ever in the world, just saying, I am very modest. I'm very modest.
So earlier you talked about the 606 pass attempts, I think it was. And then if you look at, and I believe you mentioned this in your article as well, so we're talking about Gary Kubiak, and people are probably listening and they're saying, Stefanski's the offensive coordinator. And there was a quote, and I think you even mentioned in your article that he said he's been an OC all of 3 games, right?
Yep.
So he's leaving his ego at the door. He's welcoming in Gary Kubiak, who's been in the league for almost 25 years, maybe somewhere around there. So looking at Kubiak's numbers, and I think it was right around a 50-50 split. Maybe it favored
passing. Very close. Yeah, it's 55% to the wide receivers, but you're looking at a 53% of passing plays compared to run plays. But that kind of went back and forth. That's an average since 1995, but that's still pretty dang close to being an even split. Continue.
Thank you.
You're
so
welcome.
when you look at Gary, when you look at Gary Kubiak, and a great resource that I like to use, and Mitch, you and I, we talk about this a lot. FF Statistics, the database that they put together, it is absolutely incredible. So I believe that goes back to 2000. And if you look at the years that Gary Kubiak was an offensive coordinator in Denver, the head coach in Houston, there's really I don't want to say it was a balance, but one year he might have had a top 5 receiver. One year he might have had a bell cow back, So when you're looking at the 606 pass attempts, and if you're getting more towards the 50-50 split, then you're losing about 100 total targets. I believe it's 50 total targets for Thielen and Diggs. My math was a little off there.
I don't do math, so I was just nodding like you were totally correct. So you could have run with that. I'd have been like, sounds good to me. I don't do math.
See, so again, we're in the 21st century now. We have the video chats, and before it was just audio. So, we could just look at our screen. And now I see both of you moving, and I'm just like, it's distracting, And so.
Well, actually, Mitch is still frozen, so I took another sad, forlorn picture. I'll send to you so you can see what Mitch looks like right now. He's very deep in thought.
So real quick for the listeners, what Lauren's talking about, before we started recording, Mitch's video was frozen and he looked like the saddest person in the world. But again, as a Lions fan, you might be able to expect that. But
it happens a lot, like all the time.
So again, going back to the numbers, around 600 pass attempts last year. This year, if we take that 53-47 projection, we're losing about 50 targets total for Thielen and Diggs, who accounted for about 51% of the targets last year. Mitch, given that, and with you thinking that they're going to be more run-oriented than they were last year, do you think they're going right around wide receiver 13 and 14? So there's really not a huge discount, but Lauren, you mentioned it. Diggs is about maybe half a round later.
Right.
Mitch, do you think they can meet that value there? Can they return value in redraft at wide receiver 13 or 14?
I think they can, just because last year they were both top 10 guys. And so even with the volume dropping off a little bit, I still think they'll be completely okay. The tight ends, like Irv Smith is a great run blocker, and he's good at catching the ball, but he's not going to come in and get a 15% target share off the bat. And Dalvin will get some out of the backfield, but I think we could pretty much count on Thielen and Diggs getting another 50% target share in that offense.
Yeah, and you're looking at an offense right now that next year could have 2 top 10 wide receivers. In half-point PPR, Diggs missed it by only 15 points. He finished as wide receiver 12. Adam Thielen was wide receiver 6. But this coming year, because they're going to incorporate Diggs more, because they are going to run the ball more, that opens up the field for better quality passes as opposed to just forcing the pass like DiFilippo did. So like I said, you could be looking at a team right now that has 2 wide receiver ones on, or top 10 wide receivers on their squad.
That's a great point. And bring up, we look at Stefanski. He was quoted. Somebody asked him, is it a requirement to run the ball a lot to set up play action? And he said he's read the articles. He saw the stats. It's not required. So these people that think they are just going to force feed Dalvin Cook, because Gary Kubiak, he likes to run the ball a little bit more than DiFilippo did last year. This passing game's not going to disappear. And just like people are kind of saying that Diggs and Thielen both are going to lose value, I got Kirk Cousins at wide receiver. We're talking about wide receivers. Kirk Cousins at quarterback 23 in the Scott Fish Bowl 9. Quarterback 23.
I love him so much. Him so much. So much.
He's people knock him, they love to throw that number out that, it's been this long since he's beat a team that's over 500. My fantasy teams don't care about that. Okay. I don't care what he's doing. I'm not a Minnesota Vikings fan, but he's hyper efficient. He's not going to throw many interceptions. I think 11 last year, somewhere around there, maybe, I think 11 might be the max in his career. That might be misquoted. But one thing, so I think Lauren, Mitch, you're both in agreement at their current price. If you had to pick, and Lauren, you were a little hesitant, easing into that answer.
I was. Another quick thing about Cousins too. So he had a career high pass completion percentage this year at 70.1. He also had a 75.9% true completion percentage, 75.2 play action completion percentage. That's Kirk Cousins. That's the guy who's going to be throwing the ball in this offense. I mean, it's set up for success. I love it.
Mitch, you brought up a great point. So this is the last thing. I'm going to go Diggs here. And it's not a hard, I think we're splitting hairs here, honestly. I don't think it's going to be a 50 or 100-point discrepancy in whatever format you're playing. I think they're both going to be fairly close. And I don't know if going one over the other is going to make or break your team. But Mitch, you brought up the wide receiver 2 sets versus, possibly going with an 11 personnel. So the first 14 weeks, they ran 2 wide receiver sets or 1 wide receiver 28% of the time. That rose to 40% of the time after Stefanski took over. So again, I'm not saying they're going to throw away 11 personnel, but if you're moving Thielen to the outside, he's still a hyper-productive receiver.
Yes.
He caught the ball 79% of the time when he was in the slot. It dropped to 71% when he was moved to the outside. So still extremely productive, but there is a little bit of a drop, which is expected because your average depth of target is going to increase a little bit when you're moving to the outside. You're not getting those dump offs, but I think that's one thing to keep in mind. If Thielen is being moved to the outside with more 2 wide receiver sets, it's one thing that I think can help bump Diggs' value up in relation to Thielen. So again, Lauren, read the article. Fantastic. If you haven't read it, is it on fantasyfootballers.com? Or
yes, it is on the Fantasy Footballer. So it's thefantasyfootballers.com. It is also on my website, which I do not recommend Googling. Just go straight to your URL, type in stepmomlauren.com. I have it up there as well. I put all my, recent work up there, videos, podcast guest spots, all my stuff's on there too. So you can have a direct link to it. We have a lot of stuff that we publish on the Fantasy Footballer. So even though this only came out like a few days ago, it's already kind of bumped down because everyone's, writing and producing and publishing and whatnot. But you can find it on my website. And then you go right back to the Fantasy Footballers, but at least it's right there at the top. It's easy to find.
And I know you shared it on Twitter as well. So anybody that's listening, it's the 21st century. Most people are on Twitter. I know it's on your Twitter as well. So There are a few other situations we want to talk about and a few other wide receiver tandems. So these are 2 where, based on training camp news, they're directly impacted. So Mitch, Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate. And I know the suspension, it's hurting your dynasty rosters, at least through the first 4 weeks. And these are not the high profile wide receiver ones that we just got done talking about in Diggs and Thielen, but these are 2 guys that, given the situation, could return value. So Mitch, Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, are they worth drafting in 2019? Do you want anything to do with them?
With Shepard and Tate, I think the big thing we're going to have to worry about in that offense is they're both slot wide receivers. And you'd have to figure that Tate would have been in the slot. He has that 4-game suspension, but after that, he's just not an outside guy. And so you would have to assume that they put Shepard on the outside. And Shepard, even though he played almost 60% in the slot, he only had a 60% catch rate. And him moving outside, we know the catch rate usually drops with those outside wide receivers. And so that's going to drop to the Cortland Sutton level of being, maybe 50%. So it's going to be a 50-50 ball each time that it's thrown to him. If I had to pick between the 2, I'd probably pick Shepard just because he doesn't have that PED suspension hanging over him. But as we see Tate's value continue to drop because of this, and it's going to drop. And if it drops to a point to where you could get him for pretty cheap, because you're only missing him for the first 4 games. And after that, I think he'll still be a good play through the playoffs.
So Lauren, we're looking at Shepard and Tate. One of the big concerns with this offense is there's nobody to stretch the ball down the field. Do you think that's going to play a role? And do you think Shepard and Tate, do you think either of those receivers could fill that role? Like Mitch said, Tate's probably going to be relegated to the slot once he comes back from suspension. But do you think either of them can fill that role and kind of stretch the field? Or do you think with all the options being underneath options, Barkley, Ingram, Shepard, Tate, that it's all going to just be an absolute cluster and they're going to be, it's going to be a mess? What do you think here? How do you see it playing out?
I'm kind of seeing it that way too, because we're talking about options of throwing the ball deep. Eli Manning can't throw the ball deep anymore. Like, he is a broken old man. No offense, Giants fans. Sorry. He doesn't throw deep anymore. So really your only options are the slot positions, the middle of the field. They could make some creative things work, I suppose. Personally, for me, I'm not looking at either one of them. I think there are just better options that I would like to have on my team. And I don't like to watch the Giants play. And I do. I take that back because I love making fun of Eli Manning. His faces are so amazing. They are completely gift worthy. So I take that back. I just don't want any part of this offense in fantasy wise, except for Saquon Barkley. Everyone else, no, bleh, junk. I don't like it.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on this, and again, it's not the top tier wide receiver assets, but it is a tandem where, I think there is going to be some value.
Yes, there will. I just don't like it.
Right. And especially based on the price. Shepard, he's going wide receiver 39, Golden Tate, wide receiver 43. So whereas we looked at Thielen and Diggs, wide receiver 13 and 14, these guys, they're rounds and rounds later. Mitch, with Shepard with the broken thumb. So I want to really briefly just look at it from a dynasty perspective. Have you thrown any, and I guess Tate too, have you thrown any low ball offers? Because we know dynasty, it's so long term, but the short term information available and the things that happen, it really makes an impact. So have you thrown any feelers out there?
I've thrown some, but I haven't had a lot of responses the last week for whatever reason. There's just...
Sucks.
Yeah, there's just nothing out there. I don't know why, because a couple of our leagues are really, really active. And then there's some others to where there's nothing. And you won't hear anything for a week.
Well, one thing I know, whenever, especially if like a player gets injured in Dynasty, or there's a setback or there's a piece of negative news, I'm on the prowl. I pounce. And there are some people, they look at that and they furrow their brow. They look at it negatively. So I think right there, maybe it's rubbing people the wrong way, but they are guys. And it's funny, 2 weeks ago, I threw a ton of offers out for Golden Tate. And like you said, Mitch, either I didn't get a response or I was told that he was worth so much more. Well, now with the PED suspension, let's see what he's worth. I don't know. But yeah, again, for me personally, I like them at their current value, but it's nobody that I'm super excited about. I'm not looking at these guys and thinking, that's a really late round target that's going to put up even wide receiver 2 numbers. So I think it's kind of chalk here. I think we all agree, just really nothing here. You get outside of Barkley and Ingram, it's just kind of a wasteland. There is one last situation here, and this one, it's kind of funny. So we went both top tier receivers, 2 pieces of rubbish in Shepard and Tate, and now we look at Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So I want to look at the Los Angeles Chargers. So Lauren, one of the big things is the Melvin Gordon potential holdout. And I know. And that is going to have a huge impact. That's going to have a huge impact on how this offense looks. One, what is your opinion on Melvin Gordon?
Stupid.
Why do you say that?
I'm mad because I drafted him first overall in the Scott Fish Bowl. And then one day later, he's like, I'm not reporting to training camp until I get paid. I'm like, why? Why couldn't you have said this yesterday and saved me the shame and ridicule for which is now being heaped upon me? Thank you very much, Melvin Gordon. It does have a big impact on this offense, but I don't think as big as what Melvin Gordon expects his production to be. Like, you're not Saquads. You are not David Johnson. You're good. And yes, you are fantasy relevant for us, lowly fantasy football players over here who actually care about that stuff and not real football. It's garbage, real football, whatever. But, you got Austin Eckler there, too, who is also can be very productive, can step right in there and fulfill that running back role with even better hands than Melvin Gordon, I think, in my opinion. I have no numbers to back that up. That was just right off the top of my head. Hopefully I'm right. But I do like him a lot. And then you have Justin Jackson right back there, too. It's not like they don't have any other options, which is why they're digging their heels in, probably because they're also broke. But they're digging their heels in and not paying him. I don't know. I think he's shooting himself in the foot here, but it does affect the offense, just not as much as I think is going to be expected of him sitting out if he does end up doing this holdout into the regular season, as well as doing his best impression of Le'Veon Bell. If he starts dropping bars, I quit fantasy football.
Do you think he actually does hold out, though, or do you think it's going to be a game of chicken?
I don't know, because I just read an article today that LA is really putting their heels in, and there's like a $2 to $3 million difference on where it is that they're at and what it is that they want. On the flip side of that, that's really not all that bad because they're talking about a couple $1 million here over a couple years. So if they can get that hammered out, I think it'll be fine. it's really hard to say definitively if he's going to hold out. We're just going to have to take it day by day, which is the last thing that I want to do ever when I have a fantasy football squad. I am no drama, and he's bringing drama into my life. I don't like it.
No, I know you took him in the first round, Scott Fishbowl 9, and I don't want to, be too negative, but
don't besmirch me.
But if we look at Le'Veon Bell last year, he passed up on $14.5 million, right? Melvin Gordon is not getting anything close to that this year. What is it? $5 million, maybe? And again, Mitch and I always laugh.
Yeah, chump change. I made that yesterday.
Exactly.
No big deal.
We always say like, oh, it's only $5 million.
Yeah.
But yeah, Le'Veon Bell, he passed on $14.5 million. Obviously, they're different people, but I think there's a better chance than not that he does hold out. And again, I don't want you to have your Scott Fishbowl 9 hopes.
Thanks for putting that into the atmosphere.
Here, this is me pulling it back.
No, I do agree with you too, because there definitely is a chance that he will hold out, just for the reasons that you've said too. It's there. It absolutely is. It absolutely is there. It scares me though. I don't like it.
One issue with him holding out when you compare it to Le'Veon Bell, because Le'Veon Bell wasn't signed last year. He was on the franchise tag, but he never signed it. Melvin Gordon has a contract this year for that 5th-year option. And so if he doesn't show up, that just kicks over until next year. So he's on the same contract next year if he doesn't show up at all this year.
I might be wrong, but I think he gets fined. I don't know if it's every day or every week or something.
Yeah, he gets fined every week for it too. Yep.
Oh, I just got foot clamps and my stomach hurts now just thinking about it. Oh.
And I think is it week 8 or week 10 he can come back and still have the full year?
Yeah, I think he has, if I remember right from last year with Le'Veon Bell, it's 6 full games is what he has to accrue for it to work out.
So Mitch, Lauren, we're not going to miss much from an offensive standpoint with Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson. What impact do you think it has on specifically Keenan Allen and Mike Williams?
I think Keenan Allen's going to be the same thing he's always been, a really good slot wide receiver that doesn't have any touchdown upside. I always compare him. I told you earlier, I compare him to Golden Tate. He's just a couple inches taller, but they pretty much both never get above 6 touchdowns. And then, so they usually get, 100 receptions and 1,300 yards, which is really good. But he's being drafted at wide receiver 11, and last year he was wide receiver 12, and that's usually right where he is. So I don't think you're really gaining a lot drafting Keenan right now.
All right, well, let me ask you. So, again, let's say that Melvin Gordon does sit out the entire year. We have seen the splits with Keenan Allen where he's with Melvin Gordon, still productive, but then we've seen the splits without Melvin Gordon. And it's like a 5-point per game difference. You're not willing to say that he outproduces wide receiver 11 if Melvin Gordon sits out?
Not if we compare it to last year, only because when Keenan pretty much had 3 games without him. He had a game with 5 targets, a game with 8 targets, and then I was going to talk to you about this. He had another game with 19 targets. And so weren't they covering him with the linebacker? I could have sworn that I remember last year Pittsburgh covered the slot wide receivers with linebackers.
You're saying because of that one outlier that we still should be having him around wide receiver 11, 12-ish,
yes,
even if Melvin Gordon sits out.
Yeah, I don't see him becoming, a top 6 or 7 guy. I just don't see the upside with him right there. Now, Gordon, sorry. One
thing that we've talked about before too, so we talked about it in our tier episode, we talked about Juju and Michael Thomas. And even though I'm a Steeler fan, I don't have Juju in my top tier of dynasty or redraft wide receivers. And it's because of the same reason for Keenan Allen. I think they are very target dependent wide receivers. And I don't want a wide receiver that's strictly touchdown dependent, cough, cough, Mike Williams. And I don't want a wide receiver that is strictly target dependent, Keenan Allen. So it's kind of it's a nice balance between the two because you have one target dependent, one touchdown dependent. But I kind of see him in the same situation as you, Mitch. I think he's a target hog, but that's his upside really. He's a glorified, Jarvis Landry in terms of value. He's not going to get in the end zone all that often, not to return the value. If you're looking at him as a 5, 6, 7, top 7 wide receiver, but I think he's going right where he should be. Now, Lauren, Mike Williams, he's a very polarizing guy. And again, on Twitter, it seems like he comes up every day. You have people very pro Williams, people very, against him. What are your thoughts on him in 2019? Let's take the Melvin Gordon holdout out of the equation? Just in general, how do you view him?
I like him this year with Tyrell Williams gone. I think he has a lot more potential, not only just in terms of fantasy production, but the whole dual Williams on the same team was giving me a righteous headache, and I didn't like it at all. So I'm glad there's only one Williams left that I can handle on this Chargers, LA, wherever the heck they're at now. LA, you have enough teams. Anyway, but he's going around the end of the 5th round in half PPR. I like him if I miss out on other players in his tier. So, for example, Tyler Lockett is going at the 504. If I perhaps miss out on Tyler Lockett, I would be okay taking Mike Williams there. Let's see, another one. But at the same time, James White is going at that 507 position, which I really like as well. I wouldn't mind taking a James White. It would have to be based on what my roster looks like and what my needs are for me to really say, okay, I'm cool with it. I'm not running out and super targeting him, but I do like him better with Tyrell Williams gone. I even like him better with Hunter Henry there. I like that a lot too. I like having those lots of different options that they have. It works. I think it works well for that offense to have multiple mouths to feed, even though everybody hates that. I just think it has lots of production for Hunter Henry too.
You mentioned the multiple Williams, and I cannot remember who it was. But I remember, and if either of you are familiar with the bar in Pittsburgh, Permanis, they have the sandwiches, they throw the coleslaw on there. It's a staple of the city. But I was there for a game, and I forget who it was, but I had a tight end, and the name is escaping me. I cannot remember. But the team had another tight end with the same last name. And, of course, I'm at the bar and watching the game, fantasy football. It's my main reason for being there and watching the game. And the tight end, the same last name, scored. I literally jumped up out of my seat, and it ended up being the other tight end with the same last name.
Oh my God. I hate that. Or when like your friends are like, yeah, touchdown so-and-so. You're like, really? Like, oh no, wrong guy, my bad. But then why did you say that?
It's so weird because you might see the last name on the jersey, or just the announcer says, oh, Williams touchdown, and you have that slight glimmer of hope, and then it comes crashing down.
But isn't that we love fantasy too? I don't know. It's so addictive.
It is. It's a very give and take relationship. Mostly I give money towards it and it takes it.
It takes my soul away.
But yeah, so you're liking Mike Williams. Mitch, how do you see it playing out? In this situation, let's say Melvin Gordon sits out, because again, I think that's a better possibility than not. Do you see this benefiting him compared to Keenan Allen, or do you kind of see it the same way? It's just kind of like, they're still going to be as productive as they would have been.
I actually like Mike Williams a lot. I don't like him a lot already, but I like him a lot more if Gordon does sit out, just because the Chargers were...
Mitch, I have to stop you right now.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for making me feel so much better, because I also have Mike Williams on my Scott Fishbowl team.
Yeah. I really like him a lot.
Thank you. I feel so much better about my life. You may continue with your analysis. I had to stop you and let you know I'm a happy lady now. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Wait, Mitch, before it gets back to you, we could have just titled this episode, and maybe we will, Lauren's Scott Fishbowl 9 team, apparently, because every player...
It's been 2 players, all right. Calm it down, killer. You brought SFB9 up first. I just happened to follow in your wake with better players. I'm just kidding. One of mine's about to sit out, so who the hell knows?
Yeah, Mitch, so what do you think here? You like Williams, and I'm going to throw a counter argument here after you say whatever you're going to say.
Well, good luck countering this. So,
oh, snap. Where's my popcorn?
The Chargers were 25th in the league in pass attempts last year. With Gordon being out, they're going to pass more. They're going to have to. And Hunter Henry's probably going to get 80 targets, 90 targets next year. And Gates and Virgil Green, combined for 73 last year. So I don't think Hunter Henry's going to eat too much into Mike Williams. They could split the touchdowns a little bit more, because they both had about a 20% target rate inside the 10-yard line. I just think with the more pass attempts, it's going to have to. Mike Williams only had 66 targets last year. That's going to go up without Tyrell Williams, just like you said, Lauren. So good luck with that, John.
All right, so let me ask you a question. We know, and it's always interesting when you bring up different sources and references, but Pro Football Focus, and I see myself in the little picture here on our video audio, and damn, do I talk with my hands a lot. And I noticed in the Podathon, literally, it's all Italian hands just going everywhere. But we look at Pro Football Focus, and the Chargers, their line, per Pro Football Focus, it could be a little bit better. So if you have a line that's going to collapse, All right. And Melvin Gordon is not there. Now Austin Eckler is going to be there. But you have a receiver in Mike Williams who his average air yards per target is 15.2 air yards. All right, so he's going to be running down the field. Who's going to be the better target to dump the ball off to if that line's collapsing? For me, it's Keenan Allen. While I might not see him as a top 5, 6, 7 receiver, Lauren, I've talked about this on multiple shows, and I talk about it on Twitter all the time. I like to throw wagers out, even with random people on Twitter. So if there's ever a take that you're very passionate about, let me know. Maybe we can get a bet on it. But there's one bet that I have that Mike Williams will not surpass. I think it was 85 targets was what I said. And I still see that to be the case. Even if Melvin Gordon's out, I think a lot of the targets, I think Hunter Henry is going to eat into that. Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson to a slight extent. But then, Travis Benjamin's still there. I think if there's going to be situations where Rivers has to get rid of the ball, I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on Mike Williams being the main beneficiary. Now, I know he had, 66 targets last year and wasn't that involved in a lot of games. But the only way I really see him popping, regardless of whether or not Melvin Gordon's there, it's if Keenan Allen goes down. And Mitch, you and I, we talked about it. It was that Kansas City Chiefs game. He had, 7 catches, whatever yards, and he was left alone in the end zone at least once. Like, they just completely forgot to cover him. That's the only way that I think he returns that wide receiver 25 value. And Lauren, it's funny because, we always look at PPR values, and you brought up 0.5 PPR, and it's always really good to see a different perspective. And Mitch and I, we're in different leagues too. Maybe it's a tiered PPR system or whatever the situation is. Hell, I'm in one league, it's still standard scoring. We're back in 1998. But, Mike Williams, I think he does have more value in that 0.5 PPR or standard scoring. But once you incorporate the full PPR, that's where we see guys like Keenan Allen. I think they're more of the beneficiary.
Right, because you're talking about a difference in targets that really does speak those volumes. That's one of the reasons why we use that half point, because it's kind of the best of both worlds put together, and then you can kind of extrapolate it as you go on from there. Also, just another thing too, I think, hasn't Keenan Allen's catch percentage, has that dropped recently? I'm looking at his game logs from last year, and it seems like he was anywhere between 57%, and he got all the way up to obviously 100% catch rate, but that was only on 5 targets. And I think Mike Williams has a better catch percentage than Keenan Allen does. So if we're missing a whole wide receiver and Terrell Williams being gone, you're going to talk about Phillip Rivers. Is he going to have a little bit more faith and trust in Mike Williams to get it done? I don't know. And again, I don't have those numbers in front of me, so don't quote me on those. But for some reason, I remember that sticking in my head for some reason. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, where's Keenan Allen going in ADP right now? Do we know?
So according to, we use FFWC ADP, and, there's several different sources. But in FFWC, he's going wide receiver 11.
Okay.
So I'm okay taking him there, especially, again, I think he's going to be more of a beneficiary. And I don't know. And Lauren, like you said, looking at the players going around Mike Williams, I would be more comfortable. I think Chris Godwin, he's going right before him, like wide receiver 22 or 23-ish, which to me is crazy. Give me Chris Godwin over Mike Williams. But again, he's going slightly before him. So I think a lot of people are saying that. But, I can't fall in love with the guy. I mean, you talk about his catch rate. That's because he was left open. Yeah. I look at the Kansas City game, and I've been talking about 1 or 2 specific targets and kind of saying it in jest. But I don't know. I think if I had to choose, so for me, and I'm going to ask you two the same question. For me, Keenan Allen at wide receiver 11, Mike Williams wide receiver 25. If I had to pick one of them at their value, and this is really the first situation tonight we've talked about where there was a big discrepancy in their startup value or, their draft value, their ADP. Give me Keenan Allen at wide receiver 11. I'm not even thinking about Mike Williams at wide receiver 25. Mitch, what are you thinking?
I don't want Keenan Allen at all. I'd much rather have Mike Williams. And his touchdowns are going to drop. There's no way he's going to get another 10 touchdowns on, the 65 targets or whatever. But I completely disagree. He's going to get over 85 targets this year because they're going to have to pass the ball more.
Do you want to jump on that? Do you want to jump on that bet as well?
Why not?
All right, we'll figure the terms out later.
Yeah, I want to believe Mitch, so therefore I'm agreeing with him. That helps me out a lot. But no, I actually do like Mike Williams better than Keenan Allen myself. that high of a draft pick, I want to have a little bit more consistency as it goes down into the draft. When we're talking about the 5th round, I'm willing to take shots on some guys at that point that have high upside. By the time I get to the 3rd round, I want my stud wide receivers already on my team so I can focus on getting some good tight ends and then some good running backs and then going back to that wide receiver position. If my strategy goes well, that is. But you can't go into a draft with like a permanent strategy set into place. But
Absolutely.
where the way I've been mocking and the way I kind of see things going off the board from different places, Keenan Allen just has not been on my radar. Not that I'm saying it's a bad pick. It's just not one that I'm super duper in love with or gets me super excited or like flustered. No, it doesn't give me the tingly winglies. Don't like it. Mike Williams though, that one's not bad.
And that's fair. And again, it's a really polarizing debate because, it's all about value for these two because they're not going super close together. Again, we talk about Shepard and Tate. They're within
2 rounds of each other, I think.
They're right by each other. And then you have, Diggs and Thielen, who might be a half a round apart.
Right.
So there, it's just who do you like more? Here, I can get the appeal of Mike Williams. And Lauren, you and I and Mitch, we talked about this before we started recording. It doesn't have to be, 1,000% this or 1,000% that. I can see the case for Mike Williams. I still prefer Keenan Allen. I think he's going to be more of a beneficiary.
Yeah.
But again, for you, Lauren, I will say my prayers tonight to the fantasy football gods that Melvin
Give them
Gordon
libations.
that he does not hold out this year.
Thank you. I appreciate
Absolutely. So like we talked about at the beginning, we could have gone into so many teams here tonight with these wide receiver duos. Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Cleveland, the Los Angeles Rams. They have 3 that we could have talked about. Cincinnati, but it was a great start with Thielen and Diggs, and it really tied in well, obviously, Lauren, with your article that you wrote and the research that you put in. Because if you look on Twitter, this has been going on for 3 years now. Constantly, you see the polls. Who would you rather have, Thielen or Diggs? And no matter what you put, you're wrong because the other side's going to bash you.
Yeah.
But I think, and again, this whole offseason, we're seeing it again. So, and then, we dove into Shepard and Tate and then Williams and Allen. And these 2 pairs of wide receivers, they're critical to look at because both offenses are changing, and we looked at Shepard and Tate and the broken thumb, which for the record, I don't think it's that big of a deal because of what the part of the year that happened. I think he's going to be back and I think he's going to be okay. Tate, we'll see with the suspension. And then in Williams and Allen, again, the Melvin Gordon suspension, is that going to have an impact? What role is that going to play? Who's it going to benefit? And, listeners, I would love for you to chime in when we release the episode on Twitter. Throw your thoughts out on all 3 of these pairs.
And tell me I'm right.
Yes.
Tell me I'm right.
That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
That is all that matters. We're here. We have guests that come on. And again, we have had so many great guests this summer, and we're going to have a few more joining us here. But we're here to open it up to you guys. We want you to feel welcomed. And you're the star here, Lauren. We anything you say, maybe Mitch will agree with you, even though, I don't know. It seems like anytime we have a guest, I'm always outnumbered with my takes, and then Mitch walks away feeling all high and mighty. But
oh, yay! Put you in your place. That's right.
So that's kind of how this goes. But Lauren, before we wrap things up tonight, tell the listeners where they can find you, upcoming projects. What are you working on the rest of the summer?
So really the rest of the summer is, gosh, it's almost over. Can you guys believe it? It's going to be fantasy football soon. Like this Thursday is the first preseason game. I can't even, my brain is trying to wrap my head around that. But you guys can follow all of my work on the Fantasy Footballers. Obviously, I'm a writer contributor for them. It's been awesome so far this summer being a part of that family. It's pretty cool. You can find all of my work also on my website. It's stepmomlauren.com. Don't Google it unless you're really into pornography, then go for it. But I don't endorse that. I don't endorse that at all. But yeah, you can find it on my website. I'm on all the social media platforms as well. Very easy. Stepmom Lauren, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And I also will be releasing at least 1, if not 2 videos per week on YouTube. So you guys can follow me there. Please. I need a custom URL and I can't do that unless I have 100 subscribers. So I need y'all to come find me on YouTube and like and subscribe to my page. So I feel better about myself. That's how it works. I just need constant gratification from all of you to have worth in my life.
You heard her. Subscribe.
That's right.
Follow her on Twitter. And again, Lauren, we had an absolute blast.
Yeah, me too. Thank you guys so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on.
John, you were okay. Mitch, you and I clearly had this going.
Yeah, we could just kick John off after this.
I know, just whatever.
That's fine. Well, I was going to say, it's always nice to have people on that we don't necessarily always interact with on Twitter or we're in leagues with. And Mitch and I, we're in so many leagues, and it seems to always be the same people. So those are the viewpoints and opinions we get. And it's so, it's refreshing, even though you might be wrong on a lot of your takes. Just kidding. But it really is great.
And fighting words.
But again, so great to have different guests on here with varying viewpoints and, different things that we can take away. Because in fantasy football, I think you have to be able to change your mind about things. And if you're so steadfast and hard-headed and you think, oh, this is it, this is the only way to do it, or this is the only take to have in a situation. So again, it's very refreshing to get different opinions.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for jumping on. And before we sign off here, I don't think we mentioned it, but we are doing, and the timing was awful, but we're doing a Sterling Shepard jersey giveaway. I got this jersey a few weeks ago, and then he had to go break his thumb.
I was going to say, doesn't it have Band-Aids on it?
Yeah. So we're doing
He signed it before he broke his finger, so that's good.
Oh, so it's legit legible. Perfect.
Legit signed, yep.
I want it. How can I sign up for it?
So, well, I'm glad you asked, Lauren. So
You're welcome. I'm seriously going to sign up for it.
Leave a 5-star review and then show that you subscribe. DM us on Twitter, Instagram at Superflexology, or just reach out to Mitch and myself to be entered to win. It's as easy as that. We're doing the drawing this Wednesday, July 31st. So you still have a little bit of time whenever this episode comes out. But again, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for all the listeners spending time with us. I'm John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club. For Mitch Sorensen at DinoMC. Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Superflexology. Have a great night.
Thank you for listening to the Superflexology podcast. If you want the latest news in fantasy football, follow us on Twitter at Superflexology, The Bauer Club, and DinoMC.